The counting house. The night I broke into the Meller house, I wasn't afraid of ghosts. I was afraid of what I found inside that had clearly been living there. My name is Daniel Croft, and I've been doing urban exploration for about 6 years. Abandoned schools, shuttered factories, decommissioned hospitals. I've walked through places that would make most people's skin crawl and felt nothing but a quiet, documentary calm. I catalog decay. I photograph the geometry of neglect. I don't frighten easily, and I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest of this, because I need you to believe me. The Meller House sits at the dead end of Culver Road in a town called Prosper, Indiana, which has not prospered in a very long time. It's a Victorian-era farmhouse, 3 stories, wrapped in a porch that sags at both ends like a mouth turned down in permanent disgust. The paint has long since given up and peeled away, leaving the bare wood the color of old teeth. The windows on the upper floors are dark, but the ones on the ground level catch light in a way that always made it look like someone had just stepped back from them. I'd driven past it a dozen times before I finally decided to go in. I parked off the road just before dusk on a Thursday in late October. The air smelled like turned earth and chimney smoke drifting from somewhere far off, and the grass in the yard was knee-high, silver-tipped with frost. I had my camera, my flashlight, and my usual backpack kit: duct tape, spare batteries, a basic first aid roll. The front door was not locked so much as it was leaning, and when I shouldered it open, it made a sound less like a creak and more like a low, wet exhale. The smell hit me first. Not the mildew and rodent musk I expected, not the usual cocktail of rot and stagnant air. It was something almost sweet, like overripe fruit or flowers left in a vase too long past their dying. It was thick enough to taste, and it settled on the back of my tongue and stayed there. The entry hall was intact, which surprised me. Most abandoned houses get picked over. Furniture stripped, fixtures torn out, copper piping ripped from the walls. But the Meller house looked like someone had simply walked out and never returned. A coat rack still held 3 jackets. A ceramic umbrella stand still held 2 umbrellas. The wallpaper, dark blue with a repeating pattern of small white birds, was peeling at the seams, but it was all still there, still clinging to the plaster like it refused to let go. I moved through the sitting room, photographing, noting details. The fireplace mantel had a row of small objects on it: a thimble, a pocket watch, a length of twine tied into a careful knot, a child's wooden top. I remember thinking they looked arranged, deliberately arranged, like items on an altar or evidence tagged at a crime scene. That's when I heard it for the first time. Upstairs, a slow, rhythmic sound, counting. A voice, low, gender-neutral, utterly without inflection, was counting numbers in sequence, beginning somewhere in the 40s when I first registered it. 47, 48, 49, steady as a metronome. I stood at the bottom of the staircase with my hand on the newel post and listened, and the sweetness in the air thickened, and for the first time in 6 years of doing this, I considered turning around. I didn't. I've analyzed that decision many times since. The honest answer is that I still didn't believe, not truly, that there was something wrong. I'd heard things in abandoned buildings before: birds in walls, water in pipes, acoustics that bent ordinary sound into something uncanny. I told myself this was the same. I told myself that as I climbed the stairs, testing each step before I trusted it, and I kept telling myself that all the way to the second-floor landing. The counting continued. 63. 64. The hallway had 4 doors. 3 were open. The rooms beyond them dark and empty. Bare mattresses, collapsed dressers, the architecture of forgotten lives. The 4th door at the end of the hall was closed, and the counting was coming from behind it. I stood in front of that door for what I think was 2 full minutes, long enough for the count to climb into the mid-70s. The door itself was ordinary. White paint, glass knob, the knob's facets catching my flashlight and scattering little cold diamonds across the walls. I put my hand on it. The glass was warm. Not room temperature warm. Skin temperature warm, like a hand had been wrapped around it moments before. I opened the door. The room was empty. A child's bedroom, once. Small bed frame, no mattress. A window with a cracked pane through which the evening air leaked, thin and cold. A closet with a mirrored door, standing open. And on the bare hardwood floor, written in what I sincerely hoped was red paint, were numbers. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They covered every inch of the floor in a dense spiral pattern, winding inward from the walls toward the center of the room, growing smaller and more cramped as they approached the middle, the handwriting tightening as though running out of space, running out of time. The counting had stopped. The silence it left behind was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I looked at the center of the spiral on the floor. The numbers ended there, not with a round number, not with any obvious terminal figure. They ended at 4008, mid-spiral, as though whoever had been writing simply stopped, or had been stopped. I took my photographs. I know that sounds clinical, even deranged. That I stood in that room with the warm doorknob and the spiral of numbers and the smell of dying flowers, and I just took my photographs. But it's what I do. And doing it kept my hands steady and my breathing even. And those two things felt very important to maintain right then. I was almost out the door when the counting resumed. Behind me. From the closet. Very close. 49. 50. But that's not what made me run. What made me run was that it was starting over. Counting back up from 49, from exactly where I had first heard it when I was at the bottom of the stairs. And the voice, I realized, now that I was close enough to hear it without a floor between us, was not a voice exactly. It was more like breathing. Breathing that had learned the shapes of numbers. Breathing that had been practicing for a very long time. I ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, through the sitting room with its arranged objects on the mantel, through the entry hall with its patient coat rack, out through the sighing door and into the frost silver grass. And I got in my car and I drove, and I did not stop driving until I hit the interstate. I've since looked into the Meller house's history. A woman named Edna Meller lived there alone from 1962 until she disappeared in 1979. Neighbors reported that in her final years, she rarely came outside. They reported that they could sometimes hear her, through open summer windows, counting. Always counting. They assumed she'd lost her mind. No one ever found out what she was counting toward or why. When she reached her number, she was simply gone. I think about the spiral on the floor, how the numbers wound inward toward that central point, how they ended at 4008 and didn't begin again on the floor. I think they began again somewhere else. And I think whatever is in that room is still counting, still practicing, still waiting for something to arrive at the right number. I don't know what happens then. I don't know what happens at 4008. I only know that when I left, the count behind me was already climbing, and I've been checking every night since, just to make sure the number in my head doesn't somehow match. So far, it hasn't. But some nights, just before sleep, I find myself counting, and I don't remember starting.